Hi, this is my career genogram, and I want to go ahead and zoom in and start first with my grandparents and their generation, starting with my maternal grandparents on the left. My grandfather worked as a plant manager working at a rope factory. My grandmother was a homemaker, which is the term that she would use. And then if you slide to the right, looking at my paternal grandparents, my grandfather was, when he retired, he was a project manager. He worked for R.J. Reynolds for most of his career and ultimately retired from R.J. Reynolds, which is what these three check marks represent. All three of my living grandparents are now retired from their professions. My grandmother worked as a bookkeeper, working for the bulk of her career for a construction company. She was incredibly intelligent, was really, really great with numbers, had worked in this bookkeeper role for her entire career. The stars indicate that all four of my grandparents, their highest education credential was the high school diploma. So they were coming up and during a time, working at a time when they did not necessarily need a college education. And so all graduated high school, and that was the end of their formal education experiences. What I'll say that's interesting about this generation, or at least what I find interesting, is that all of my grandparents who worked, when they came home at 5 o'clock, when they clocked out, they clocked out. Work didn't come home with them. They did not think about work or talk about work. It was very much work is done at 5 o'clock when we go home, and home is family time, which is not the case for my husband and I and what our kids see, and it's certainly not the case for what we saw growing up as children. So when you drop down to the next generation, you have my mom and dad's generation. On his side, my dad was an only child. He attended school, but he never, after high school, but he never graduated from a college or earned a college degree, which is indicated by this book, open book. Became a sales representative working for PepsiCo. It was a very labor-intensive job. He's been there for more than 2 decades and will ultimately retire from PepsiCo. But it's not the career path that he would have chosen. For many years, my dad has talked about, for most of my childhood even, that he really wanted to pursue education. He wanted to be an educator. He wanted to teach and coach. And he spent a lot of time thinking about going back to school, but ultimately never did because my father's income very much sustained our lifestyle. And to go back to school and to pursue education would have meant a pretty severe cut in income. And so he could never justify it. And so while he valued education, wanted very much to go into the education profession, stuck with working in the very labor-intensive sales representative position for PepsiCo to support his family. On my mom's side, I think what's interesting here is now you start to see the cap and gown symbol, which represents a college degree was earned. And in my mom's one of 4 siblings or 4 children, and 3 of the 4 did earn a college degree. My aunt being the only one that did not earn a college degree on the side of the family, but had, just like my father, attended school and had not graduated. My uncle earned actually a JD degree and has worked in law for most of his career. And they've done different things. My aunt has a communications degree and she works as a research assistant in a biology lab at Wake Forest. My uncle, of course, went into the law side as a compliance officer. My mom is an English teacher and has been since I can remember. And my Aunt Dana currently manages a call center at Novant Health. So if we drop down again, I'm one of 4. I'm the oldest of 4. And so you can see myself and my 3 siblings down here on the right. And all 4 of us did graduate from college, 2 of us with advanced degrees. We have graduate degrees already. What's interesting, I think, about this is that education was very important to my family. It was certainly a value. Not only did my dad regret not going back to finishing school, but had certainly wanted to pursue a career in education and was not afforded the ability to do so. So education was important from his perspective. My mom valued her education, is certainly in the education profession and has been and will retire from that profession eventually. So education was instilled in us. We understood that it was valued and that it was important. And all 4 of us, it was important that we not only attend college, but that we earn college degrees. And all 4 did. 2 of us, my sister is an EC teacher, and myself have gone into education. She in K-12, myself in higher education. And then, interestingly enough, my brother, his degree is in physical education. He's working currently in an assisted living facility as a program coordinator, but regularly talks about going back, taking the praxis, and going into the schools, because that is also, just like my father, his dream career profession. And my younger sister is also going back to school, this time to study education. Right now she works as an administrator in a bank. And then I've included my husband, who is also in education, has been for the last 15 years in public education. He works currently as an academic facilitator for an early college high school in Charlotte, North Carolina, also with a master's degree. And I've included our children on here, our 2 daughters, 5 and 3, and then we are anticipating a son in May, which we're very excited about. And the bottom includes our the symbols that indicate the different points on the genogram. So really quickly, this assignment was really eye-opening for me. It was nice to start to think about the different career professions and different job titles that my family have pursued. And I had to do some really good conversation with my parents about it when I was creating it. And it was good to hear from them about how they understood work, because they saw their parents working. And I thought a lot about how we, my siblings and I, understood work, because we saw our parents come home with work. We saw how they reacted to work, and very much our early understandings of what it meant to work, period, and to pursue a career came from our parents. We sort of internalized that from our parents. And I enjoyed this assignment so much that I mentioned at the start of the class, I'm teaching a career development course and teaching it to college sophomores for the most part. And I enjoyed making this, and so I took it to my class, and we spent an entire class period talking about it. I asked my students to create their own career genograms, and we had a really wonderful conversation. It really was interesting to think about some of the different ways that they viewed work or careers based on how they had seen work and careers from the perspective of their own families. And they had some really great things to say. One student, when they were making their genograms, we talked a little bit about patterns they saw. And one of the things that they talked about was the way that they had chosen career paths based on either a pattern in their own family or had gone in different directions. One student talked about she's a computer science major studying cybersecurity, and she talked about the day that she told her mom, who's also working in cybersecurity, that this was the career she wanted to pursue, and it made her mom so happy. And she talked about this regular fear, because as a sophomore, she's just now starting to get into some of those upper division cybersecurity courses, and she's a little worried that she may not like it as much as she had anticipated. And she's afraid that if at some point she changes course or she decides on a different major or a different concentration, that her mother will feel disappointed. And so we had some good conversations about the expectations that we bring to the table, that we believe, whether it's been explicitly said or we've implied that the expectations are there from our own family members. And we had several students that talked about how when they looked back at their family genogram and they realized that not only have their family members pursued very labor-intensive career paths, but they had, for the most part, education hadn't been something that was vital to those career paths. And many of our students talked about being first generation and how much pressure they felt to pick a career and to go to college and to be successful and to pick a career that would support themselves. Many students talked about feeling pressure because their parents anticipated that they would go into similar professions as their own parents did. Or in some cases they said, this is what I want to do with my life, and this is what my uncle does, and I know that it bothers my dad that I want to pursue this career path. And they had just some really rich dialogue. Many students talked about points in their childhood when their parents were either laid off or unemployed, or many talked about their parents having careers that they were very unhappy in, and how they saw their parents come home upset and feeling defeated and just run down. And the students talked about how they internalized that and how it impacted the way that they approached making career decisions and career processing of the different decisions they need to make now as young adults. It was just a really good conversation. I was really glad that this assignment was brought to my attention as part of our class, because it gave me a chance to do some deep reflecting on my own, and then to take this assignment to my students and ask them to do the same. And I will say, out of my 25 students in that classroom, every single one of them spoke up. It was a class period where they were fully engaged in the material and the content, and it's a good group anyway. But some of the things that they talked about were things that I imagine are not easy to have discussion about in front of their peers. But they did a great job. And so I think that this is something that when I meet one-on-one with my college students that I can use. I can have my students think about how they understand what it means to pick a career, or what work means, and how we first understood what work looked like, and how we have really built up our own perception of what it means to work and to pursue a career path. Thank you so much.